Hello world, welcome to Ketrix channel. My name is Christian. In today's video, we are going to deploy a simple stack into Amazon Web Services using CloudFormation. As we talked in the previous video, Amazon Web Service CloudFormation provides a common language for you to describe and provision all the infrastructure resources you need in your cloud environment. It allows you to model your entire infrastructure with either a text file or a programming language. In order to understand what we are going to deploy, we need to first review a few key concepts. There are several functions you can use in your template in order to reference the parameters defined in it, or resources attributes, or other stacks outputs. For example, ref allows you to get a parameters value or the physical ID of one of the resources created in the template. Finding map allows you to select a specific value inside the mapping object. Get attribute allows you to get a specific resource attribute. Join allows you to append a set of values inside a single string separated by a specified delimiter. And sub allows you to substitute variables in an input string. You can reference parameters or resources. And finally, import value allows you to get the output value exported by another stack. Now, let's take a look at the CloudFormation template structure. You can write your template as a JSON or as a YAML file. In this video, we are going to use YAML since it's less verbose. The main entries in a CloudFormation template are parameters, mappings, resources, and outputs. Parameters and mappings are variables you can reference in your template in order to customize your stack. Resources is where you define your infrastructure, your EC2 instances, security groups, VPCs, etc. When a template is processed, a new stack will be created, and it will appear in your CloudFormation console. There, you will be able to see the events that occurred during the stack creation, the resources created, and also the outputs you defined. The outputs are values you define to describe your stack. Those values make reference to the resources created in the stack. You could create your full infrastructure in just one single stack, but I wouldn't recommend it. The template will become really hard to maintain. I prefer to split the template in different parts for readability. In order to define a parameter, you need to add it under the parameters entry. You need to give it a name, which will be the key you will use to reference it in the template. There are several attributes you can define for a parameter, which you can find in the documentation. For example, the type defines the data type of the parameter, whether it is a string, a number, or a boolean. The description, this one is optional, and it allows you to describe the purpose of your parameter. The default, which is also optional, if it is defined, it will be used as the default value for the parameter during the stack creation, unless you provide another value in the parameters file, which will then override it. The mappings work as a key value object, which allows you to define custom values for your stack in a hierarchical way. The resources is where you define your infrastructure elements. Each resource has its own properties, which you can find in the CloudFormation documentation in the description below. Here, we are defining a VPC. The types of a resource is composed of the service provider, a service name, and a data type name. We have highlighted the use of two functions, the finding map and the ref. We will analyze these and other functions in the practical part of this video. In the outputs section, you define the values that describe your stack. If you export them, you will be able to reference them from other stacks. The name you give to the output, the logical ID, must be unique within the template, and it will be the key in the outputs section. You must define the value, which can reference the resources attributes, parameters, or mappings. You can also define the export, which is optional. It will define the name, which will allow you to reference it from other stacks. This name must be unique within the region. Now we will deploy a simple stack, which will have a VPC with an internet gateway attached, a public subnet with a public route, and an EC2 instance with a security group, which will allow us to connect through SSH. Let's go. Okay, here we have our template. We have created two types of template, one which have everything inside and another one which is splitted. In this case we are going to see the first one, the one which have everything inside. We have defined the parameters, and in the parameters we have defined the VPC name, an image ID, an SSH key name, and an instance type. For the VPC name we have defined a name which is the default name. We will use this example of the VPC name for the parameters type. The image ID is the ID which will be installed in our EC2 instance. The SSH key name is the name of the SSH key we already created to connect to our EC2 instance. And the instance type, in this case we have defined it is a T2 micro. You can see we have other types of attributes defined for a parameter here. In case of mappings, well, we are going to define here the seeder block for the VPC and also for the public subnet. As you can see, we have defined the VPC. We will use as seeder block property the value returned by the function finding map, which is going to get the seeder key inside the mapping object. Just for demonstration purposes, we are going to paste the values that will be returned by the finding map function and also by the ref function. This last one will take the parameter value VPC name. Now we will create a public subnet where our EC2 instance will be deployed. The public subnet references the VPC, as we have seen before, and it will also has to set the value for the availability zone, and for that it will select the item with index 0 at the list that the function displayed there will return. That is a function provided by AWS. We will also use as a seeder block property the one defined in the mappings for the public one subnet. Now we have to define an internet gateway, then attach that internet gateway to the VPC. Here we use as a reference the internet gateway and also the VPC. Now we need to create a public route table, the public route, and also the association between the public subnet and the route table. Now we will define the security group that will be assigned to the EC2 instance. For the purpose of this video, only for demo purposes, we will allow the connection through the port 22 from any IP. The last resource we are going to define is the EC2 instance. It uses the values of image ID, SSH key name, and instance type defined in the parameters section. We will associate this EC2 instance to the security group and also to the public subnet we just created. As you may know, you can create a custom script that will be executed when the instance is created. For the purpose of this video, we have included this script just to show you that you can use stacks variables in the creation of that particular script. In this case, we are going to create a custom script using the substitution function, which uses as first parameter the string and as a second parameter the variables. You can reference them as displayed in the screen. Finally, we are going to define the outputs. For the purpose of this video, we have defined 4 outputs. The first one is the VPC ID. It takes the value using the ref function, referencing the logical ID VPC, and we are exporting it so another stack may use it. We are also going to export the public subnet ID, the VPC seeder block, and also the EC2 public DNS name. The EC2 public name is the name we are going to use to connect to the EC2 instance. Now that we have our template ready, we're going to deploy it. But first, we are going to verify that we don't have any stack created, we don't have any instance running, and we only have the default VPC. So now we execute the command. This will send to Amazon Web Services the instruction to create the stack. This may take a few minutes. The console will give you information about the events during the creation of the stack. Once the stack is created, you will be able to see the resources created and also the outputs generated. Remember, the outputs export name must be unique within that particular region. Now we can check that we have another VPC with the default name assigned. We have our subnet, and also we have our custom internet gateway. You can also check the security group, which has the inbound role that we just defined to allow the connection through the port 22. Now let's connect to our EC2 instance. For that, we need the public DNS name given to our instance. We can get that from the EC2 instance console or from the outputs, since we declared that output. To connect to our EC2 instance, we need to use the SSH key we assigned in the template. For that, add your custom SSH key to your session and use it to connect to your EC2 instance. Well, that's all for today's video. We have successfully deployed a simple stack using CloudFormation. In the next video, we are going to deploy the same resources, but using 2 separate template files in order to create 2 stacks, one for the networking and another one for the EC2 instance and security group. This will allow us to demonstrate how to use the import value to reference outputs from another stack. Once again, thank you for watching. If you have any question regarding this video, please leave it in the comments section, and I will try to answer as soon as possible. See you next time.